The Mars in 8th house placement has the capacity to be one of the most obsessive placements in your chart. So in this video, I want to break down everything you need to know about having your Mars in the 8th house, as well as the signs, and why this drastically changes what your innate talents are and where you need to embrace them, as Mars is the planet of not just our physical energy, but innate talents. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Isabelle, and today I want to talk about what it means to have your Mars in the 8th house in your chart. In this video, I will specifically cover what Mars is, what the difference is between a sign and a house, what the 8th house is, as well as the 8th house Mars and the 8th house Mars through the signs, and potential good career paths for a Mars in 8th house. If you're already familiar with Mars, if you already know about the sign and houses, and you just want to jump to the interpretation on Mars in the 8th house, check out the timestamps in the description below. And before I dive in and go any further, make sure you book a reading also in the link in the description below, where in 1 hour we dive deep into your unique astrological birth chart, as well as just your unique personality type combination. So numerology, Enneagram, we cover it all in these readings. Any and everything you want to dive into, the sky is the limit. Book a reading in the link in the description below and learn more. So for this video, I thought the best way to go about it would be to bring back an old video talking about Mars in the signs and the houses, and then we'll come back to present day filming to talk more about the 8th house. So I'm going to jump really quick to this video on Mars in general, what it is, as well as the signs versus houses. And then I'll be right back to talk more about what the 8th house is. So I'll see you in a minute. I love talking about Mars because in our modern day society, Mars is a very dominant energy, I think, that a lot of us tend to embrace, in the sense that Mars is our planet of action. It shows us how we like to take action. And a lot of us are taught that we are human doings, not human beings. And so Mars energy is something that can be over domineering, or on the other hand, it is an energy that we don't learn how to properly embrace, in the sense that we're all supposed to live 9-to-5 jobs, clock in, clock out, and some people's Mars placement serves them well with that, but for other people this can be very detrimental, such as for the Mars in 5th house. So Mars is the planet of action. In the end, it represents our masculine energy or yang energy, taking action, doing, putting our nose to the grindstone, simply. And so whatever sign your Mars is in is going to tell you how you like to take action, how you can best take action. Mars is also not just our action, how we like to move through life, but it's also our physical vitality, what gives us a sense of physical vitality. So it's very similar in many ways to how the sun sign sounds. The sun sign gives us vitality, but this is also more on the emphasis on as we move, as we physically engage with the world, as we take action, the way in which we do so will give us more physical energy and physical strength. It is also our natural talents. So not only is Mars our physical energy and strength and how we like to move through life, but it's also some of our most natural talents that we can embrace. And of course, that applies to our career naturally. So if you're interested in learning how to use Mars for your career, I'll cover that at the end of this video. But your Mars sign and house will tell you what your career strengths and talents are, how you should act, and what kind of field you should be in, the house being the field you should be in. Now, what are the houses in astrology? Oftentimes I notice that, and this happened for me too, when we're learning about astrology, the difference between a sign and a house, the line gets really blurry between the two, especially because most astrologers will want to, including me, give you all the information and say, you know, how Taurus is the 2nd house, and so the 2nd house is Taurus, and Scorpio is the 8th house. They're all associated, so that makes you go, okay, well, does that mean I have then a bit of that energy in me, that zodiac energy? If I have 5th house energy and that's associated with Leo, even if my Mars is in maybe Virgo, do I have Leo energy too? It gets really confusing, and so I want to clarify. The sign that your Mars is in is the energy. In general, for any placement, the sign is the vibe, I like to call it. And the house is where in your physical life this shows up. We have 12 areas of life under the astrology philosophy, the 12 main areas of our life, from self-identity to our unconscious to our one-on-one relationships to our family to our career. They're segregated areas of our life. And so whenever we have a planet in a certain house, it puts an emphasis on that area of life and tells us how we can best fulfill that area of life. For example, your needs with your parents or your children is going to be different than what your need is of your boss, or your needs of your community, or your needs of your romantic partner. And that's because we have separate houses. So now that you know what Mars is and what the difference is between sign and houses, let's talk for a minute about the 8th house, and then we'll get into what it means to have your Mars in the 8th house. The 8th house is the house that is often complicated, first and foremost, because there's so many different words that are associated. It's hard to know exactly what the true root theme is. And when we can break down a house to its root theme, then understanding it becomes simple. So when you're learning about the 8th house, it can be a bit confusing because words like sexuality will come up, and intimacy, which those seem in the same category, but then also shared finances, which is maybe related but kind of confusing, and then shadow work. And so then it seems like there's these 3 completely different themes coming up, and there's got to be some sort of tie. To better understand this, what helped me was understanding that Scorpio is the one who created the 8th house, so to say. Imagine Scorpio is a person, and they had to build and design a house to show what they value. And what do we know about Scorpio? Scorpio's deep, intense, obsessive, a bit sexual at times, very mysterious, very mistrusting. And my phone just went off with a notification, so I'm going to turn that off really quick because I don't want to get distracted. So it's all of these themes of depth and intimacy. So when Scorpio had to create a house showing what they value, it created the 8th house, which in the end is about intimacy. I think that is the core word that I use the most when describing the 8th house, because in the end, the 8th house represents the part of our lives in which we all need, or have a time slot for, so to say, where we allow ourselves to share and trust others. And this can be physically, mentally, or emotionally, or financially. So the 8th house does include, yes, sexuality, intimacy, shared resources, and shadow work, because it's about getting deeper with life through diving deeper into ourselves and sharing ourselves with others. When talking about the 8th house, one thing that has really helped me to understand is that intimacy is not just something we have with other people, or at least we can only be as intimate with other people emotionally as we are with ourselves. Hence why the 8th house also has to do with shadow work. This is where we learn to dive deep into ourselves. This is where we do deep inner work and go deep with other people. So whatever sign your 8th house cusp is fixed into is going to be how you find depth, how you find intimacy, what your idea of being intimate is. For example, people with a water sign 8th house cusp are going to be more stereotypical, let me share emotions in order to find that intimacy. Whereas someone maybe with an earth 8th house cusp placement is going to find that the greatest way to trust and be intimate with other people is through financially sharing with them, sharing materialistically more so with them. But regardless, the 8th house encompasses all these themes. So it does in the end root back in intimacy and sharing with others. So this is where we learn to rely on other people. It's opposing the 2nd house. The 2nd house is all about our self-worth and our self-grounding. We are completely financially and emotionally independent. This is where we form dependency. So in a way, a better word to describe all of the 8th house themes is the house of codependency, and how at some point or another in our lives, we do have a bit of codependency, because when we let people into our lives, we naturally have expectations of them and let them in on either our finances, physically or emotionally or mentally. So the 8th house in the end is all about codependency. It encompasses that phase in our life. So words to associate and themes are intimacy, sexuality, shadow work, shared finances and resources, but also often the word that comes up too is the occult, because this is where we dive deep in things. So for some people, this 8th house energy can play out as obsessive learning on something, or obsessing over things that are dark and mysterious, things that are deeper subjects, because in the end, this is all about depth. So now that you kind of have a general idea of all the different things that are encompassed in the 8th house, let's put this into application to better understand. What does it mean to have your Mars in the 8th house? As I mentioned in my intro, the Mars in 8th house placement has the capacity to be one of the most obsessive placements in the chart, at least in my interpretation. And I'm going to stick by it with this upcoming interpretation in the fact that I think the most prevalent personality trait of the Mars in 8th house is going to be their obsessive nature. Regardless of what sign your Mars is in the 8th house, the Mars in 8th house placement is someone who wants their actions to be driven in obsessive ways. This will be very similar in some form or fashion to having your Mars in Scorpio. However, there's key differences in the sense that there's a certain way you want to act, and that is going to be dictated based off the sign it's in. But at the same time, regardless of how you want to physically act, you want to be obsessed with whatever you're doing. You are driven by the desire to be fully invested and deep with something, and you must gain a sense of emotional satisfaction and closeness from your actions. Because we talked about the 8th house, and this is not just intimacy and depth with ourselves, it is depth with others. People with a Mars in 8th house can also be driven by the desire to cultivate intimate relationships more. This could be someone who, similar to the 7th house, goes about starting to date from a young age, trying to form a relationship. However, this can err on more of the emotional intimacy or physical intimacy side rather than the partner in crime themes that come up with Mars in 7th house. The Mars in 8th house, in the end, is driven by emotional closeness and, to some degree, codependency. These people can find that they do their best work when they feel like they're being supported in what they're doing. So this could be people who naturally, maybe, in one interpretation, seek out a financial partner, someone who they can financially rely on so that they can do their best work. These people in the end want to do something where they get to be obsessive and deep. And so these people, when they feel bogged down, unfortunately in modern day society, by having to pay their own bills, that can take them further away from what their best work is. However, that's just one interpretation. Another interpretation of the Mars in 8th house can be the side of the occult. These people, regardless of the sign it's in, could be more interested in going deep into their learnings. These people want to be deep with something. And so if they're not being deep with someone, they can find themselves obsessing over ideas, knowledge, research, resources, their line of work, whatever line of work that may be. I can't remember if I exactly mentioned this in the 8th house summary or not, but the 8th house, because it has to do with intimacy and going deep with ourselves, it does have to do with self-transformation, hence why it's shadow work. So shadow work really is the act of transforming ourselves, letting our shadows be brought to light, healing those dark parts of ourselves. So self-transformation is a theme with the 8th house. So Mars in 8th house is going to be someone who's constantly changing in their actions. These people can be people who jump from job to job or change jobs many times over their lifetimes because they want to feel a sense of self-transformation in the work they do. This also, though, just plays out in their personal life. The Mars in 8th house placement is someone who is emotionally driven or physically driven to act on the desire of self-transformation. This is a person who wants to feel themselves changing over their lifetime, like a metamorphosis constantly, or a butterfly coming from its cocoon, or a shapeshifter. The Mars in 8th house needs to feel a sense of change and transformation in their lives, whether that plays out in the daily, the weekly, the monthly, yearly, or decades time frame. The Mars in 8th house needs to feel a sense of self-transformation. And so this is why they can be drawn towards deep investigations where they feel like they're learning things that change their viewpoints and get them out of their self-identity, so to say. Or they're going to take this energy, more so, and put it into constantly changing themselves. So in one interpretation, this could be someone who's always changing their physical appearance or goes through solitary phases where they completely disappear and fall off the face of the earth to go deeper into themselves. I think as much as the Mars in 8th house placement is technically about intimate relationships and does imply the need to be close with other people, I think the Mars in 8th house placement is actually one that tends to self-isolate a lot in order to maintain the deep relationship with themselves that they need. For the Mars in 8th house, everything that they do in work really should reflect the self-growth work they've done. These people are going to be drawn potentially towards healing or, like I said, investigation of some sort, but in the end, it comes back to how it reflects their sense of self. A lot of self-identity does come from the 8th house because it does revolve around these deeper parts of ourselves and deep emotions that do form a part of our personality. And so the Mars in 8th house can really enjoy being in a job where they're getting to learn and develop and change themselves, but then share that with other people. And again, on the other hand, if this is maybe not so much resonating on that part of wanting to share yourself, the Mars in 8th house in the end is about depth. And so these people can find themselves very fascinated by deep or occult knowledge, or even deep or dark subjects such as crime, or maybe even the occult subjects such as like spirituality, or what I don't even know, dark magic. All these kind of themes that are seem to be labeled as bad or as mysterious or dark subjects in our modern day society tend to be things that the Mars in 8th house can be interested in. They want something that they can get themselves completely lost in, so that they can merge their sense or get out of the material world, is how I would describe it. Hopefully this last part of the interpretation is making sense, because I'm trying to find the correct words to use. But really, in the end, the Mars in 8th house just wants something to dive deep into. And if that's not channeled through self-discovery or through occult or deep subjects, it can also be encompassed or found with people. So these people can also channel this energy towards constantly seeking a romantic partner, in the sense of, I want to fully understand this person. I want to dive deep into them. I want to understand their deeper emotions and their thoughts and their beliefs. And then once I reach the end of that pool, so to say, when I figure out this person fully, I'm going to find a new person to do that with. So there is a bit of that behavior that can come up with the Mars in 8th house as well. This diving deep, learning everything they can about people, and then moving on to the next, because they're always seeking more depth. So now that you have an overview of what it means to have your Mars in the 8th house, let's talk about what it would mean to have the Mars in 8th house and in each sign. Unfortunately, I'm not going to go through every single individual zodiac sign, because that would take a really long time, and those will be separate videos that eventually come out. So we're going to go by element instead. So if you're in a Mars in 8th house and in a water sign, such as Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, you're going to be driven by the desire to be emotionally deep with life. You're someone who probably sees that stereotypical intimacy is through sharing your feelings with another person and sharing how you feel towards them or what your past childhood experience was. You're also going to be driven more by the idea of feeling emotionally deep with whatever line of work you do. So this is less so maybe the learning deep knowledge side of the Mars in 8th house. This could be more about being close with other people. These people could make good coaches or speakers because they're able to share their deeper emotion. I also think with the Mars in 8th house and water sign placement, these people are going to need more of that alone time to go deep into themselves and to transform themselves more often, because as their emotion changes, their sense of self changes. If you are a Mars in 8th house and in a fire sign, this is going to be much more of a passionate, obsessive expression, I think, of the 8th house placement. You're going to be driven by the desire to act on your passions and be fully invested in life. These people can be very involved in intense either research or intense activities, because this really does, even though the 8th house is stereotypically ruled by Scorpio, a water sign, I think this just really enhances this obsessive, passionate, fiery, but yet water energy still, in the sense that you're just wanting to be so invested in life. You want to be so deep with life. You want to experience things to the fullest. You're probably an adrenaline junkie, as any Mars in fire sign would be. But for you, this is rooted in a desire to be deep with life. So you're going to be driven towards fields probably of work where things are obsessive and maybe dark, where you're maybe on the front lines and seeing very potentially traumatic things. This could be even just idea of, for example, being a first responder, where you want that intensity, but also that depth of work. But this in your personal life can play out as seeking passionate, deep connection with other people. If you're a Mars in air signs, such as Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, and in the 8th house, you're probably going to err more towards that side of deep investigative work on knowledge, on data, because air signs are learning. So you probably see that not only is depth experienced through mental connection in your relationships, but that's also your best line of work to be in, to seek a deep experience through learning data. This is the learning the occult, learning psychology, doing work to understand other people's psychology and your own kind of placement. For you with a Mars in 8th 8th house in air sign, my words are getting jumbled here. With Mars in 8th house and in an air sign, you're emotionally or you're physically driven to act on the desire to learn and socialize. But not only do you just want to learn and socialize and meet people, you want to get to the root of their being at the same time. So you want to network, but you want to go as deep as possible when you're networking with people. This also means that when it comes to learning things, you want to be able to fully dive into something. You want to be as investigative and obsessed with whatever you're learning as possible. So being in lines of work where you're allowed to investigate is going to be really huge for these people. And finally, if you are a Mars in 8th house and in an earth sign, such as Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn, you're going to find that you're driven by the desire to have financial security and stability, but maybe even sharing this with someone else. I think this is a placement of someone who either from a young age is financially dependent and can rely on that for a while on someone else, whether that's a parent or a partner, or wants to provide that for other people. Another interpretation of this would be you want to do work related to shared finances potentially with other people. So this could be someone who manages real estate in one example, just given that any Mars earth sign placement is going to be focused on practical resources potentially. With the Mars in earth sign and 8th house placement, this is also someone who's just really driven to see tangible results for their deep inner work. And so these people can be the ones who are always booking new conferences to go to, or new retreats, or setting mile markers and goals for themselves, or getting up at 5 a.m. to go for a run, to run a marathon one day. These people are driven for the desire of depth still and obsession, but this is expressed in very material ways. So these could be the stereotypical goal getters in many ways. In the end, Mars in an earth sign is still going to show those traits of discipline, success, material success focus, practicality, but there's a deep inner need for it to be obsessive, to be deep with life, to connect with something deeper. And they feel that the way to find a deeper connection with life and with others is through practical means, through tangible means, through physical means. So now let's talk about some potential good career paths for a Mars in 8th house. Again, with this placement, it really does focus on one major theme, I think, which it means that it has a lot of different expressions. There's many different careers I think that a Mars in 8th house specifically can go into and be successful in the sense that as long as it's obsessive, you're solid. Whereas maybe with a Mars in 5th house placement or 7th house, this is much more you need to have a business partner, or you need to be in a creative field, or if Mars in 3rd house even, you need to be in communications and networking. The Mars in 8th house really is about be obsessive. Whatever you're doing, do it with your whole heart and be able to be obsessive with it. And so for that reason, I think these people do really good on project-based assignments where they get to obsess over something. So there's a lot of wiggle room here in what the Mars in 8th house can do. But knowing that there's a few different themes that we talked about with the Mars in 8th house, there's a few different potential career paths that could suit them best that fit the mold of obsession. So for example, let's call out the stereotype one that could be very beneficial for these people: investigation. Quite literally doing investigative work in crime could be very fulfilling for these people because they're getting to deeply obsess over serious subjects. Also, any other career that is in the occult where they're studying maybe astrology or psychology could be very beneficial. And so with that, these people being psychologists could also be a very good career path because they're getting to be deep with other people. I think this is especially true if you are a air Mars or a water Mars placement. And this is very different in my view than being a personal coach or a therapist, because psychology work, as far as I understand, differs in the sense that it much more is focused on the actual how the brain works side of it rather than the subjective how did that make you feel side of it, which hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying, but where they're getting to focus on the deeper mental side of things and not having to rely on being too empathetic towards people in some interpretation. Regardless, some sort of psychology work could be beneficial for these people. I would say with a Mars in 8th house, it is probably better for these people to either work one-on-one or work alone rather than work in big groups because they want to be able to be obsessive. So working solo could be best suited for these people. Any form of research could also be very beneficial for these people or fulfilling for these people, given that they get to be obsessive with that. So it doesn't have to necessarily be investigation in the sense of literal being an investigator, but this could be research-based jobs where you're getting to gather all the knowledge and obsess over knowledge and bring it all forward. And finally, the last theme I would say that could potentially be a good career path for a Mars in 8th house can do with shared resources, shared finances, some sort of career role where you're managing shared finances. So hopefully that gives you guys a pretty good idea of what it means to have your Mars in the 8th house. Let me know in the comments below if I missed anything. What are your thoughts? What is your specific Mars in 8th house placement, and how do you interpret that for your career and personal life? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I'm sure there's other people watching this video who have the same, if not very similar placement to you, and hearing your thoughts will help them with their interpretations. So comment below, let us know your thoughts, and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, of course. While you're down there, if you're hearing me say this, give us your thoughts in the comments below. If trying to create your own astrological interpretation is something that is hard for you to do and you're wanting to learn how to do it, then I invite you to check out my astrology course, the Master Astrologer, in the link in the description below, where I teach you everything that I've learned about astrology in a clear, cohesive fashion. Because let me tell you, when I got into astrology and I was trying to deepen my knowledge, the information was everywhere and it was very overwhelming to learn about it because of that. So I put it all into one clear, cohesive fashion where we go through the signs, then the houses, then the planets, and then how to read a birth chart. We cover everything just in a simple structure. So if that sounds interesting to you, if you want to learn to be your own astrologer, check out the Master Astrologer course in the link in the description below. And if you want to get half off the course, comment the words in all caps, Master Astrologer, and I will send you the information on how you can get 50% off the course. And it's super easy, by the way, to get it. So comment below. It's not much work. Learn more about it in the link in the description below. Be sure to book a reading if you want to learn more about your chart, whether that's for what the chart means, your career path based off of your chart, because not only does Mars play into your career path, but there's also other placements such as your 10th house, your Jupiter, and so much more. So book a reading if you want. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Sincerely hope you enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more videos. Once again, my name is Isabelle, and from my heart to yours, namaste.